We definitely look forward to Tuesday afternoon / Tuesday evening here at the Voice of College Football, where we get to do our Iowa show with Corey Bratta from the Hawkeye of the Storm. 5:30 Eastern, 4:30 where it counts for you folks in Iowa City and there in the heartland. We invite everybody in to leave your comments and your questions in the live chat. We will get to them. Corey, how you doing this afternoon?
Doing good. I'm ready for the next hour where we're breaking down Iowa quarterbacks and the quarterback battle, if there is one, and talk about John Budmayr. I already see comments in the chat about Johnny Budmayr, and let me just lead with this, Mark. And I'm not ripping anybody. I understand people get busy. I have reached out to the University of Iowa. I don't have any problem saying this on the air. I've reached out to the University of Iowa half dozen plus times over the past 2 weeks, and specifically the compliance office, because I want to know exactly what John Budmayr can do as an unpaid analyst. Because I know, Mark, you and I both know Nebraska got in some serious trouble for having an assistant coach that was not one of the full-time approved assistants. I think you get 16, or is that too many? Anyways, you have a certain allotment. The NCAA allows a certain number of coaches on the field working with players, and the rest of them can't have contact with players in the film room, on the field, etc. And I just want to know, I've left about 6 or 7 messages with compliance, with people, emails, voicemails. Nobody will call me back. So, I guess I'd love to be able to provide more information for those of who are. I know I've teased the John Budmayr stuff, and I've wanted to do videos, and I want to talk about this, but I just want to give Iowa an opportunity to clarify, so I'm not giving misinformation out as to what exactly he can do. Anyways, just wanted to establish that right off the bat. I'm still working on it. I'm not giving up, but I've made many, many attempts to get in contact with University of Iowa compliance. And if anybody doesn't know this, compliance's job, as you know, Mark, is to communicate and to be able to ensure that there are no rules being broken.
What you are displaying right there, Corey, is one of the reasons why your platform so successful there at From the Hawkeye of the Storm, and even better than the numbers would show, and will continue to grow. And what you've contributed here at the Voice of College Football is, for anybody who doesn't know, Corey, beyond his love and analysis and work on Iowa athletics, is a news guy. And that's foreign to most YouTube platforms in regards to being a true journalist and news gatherer.
Mark, I heard your interview though the other day with the Baton Rouge guy, and his name slips my mind.
Oh, did you catch that?
Oh, that was great. I love it. So you were a news guy, so you know what you didn't like. I heard you didn't want to get into news. Now you were doing it on a much larger scale than I ever have, but you were a news anchor for what, 3 years?
I was a news anchor reporter. Yeah. That was my first job out of college there in beautiful Ashland, Ohio, WNCO. And before I got into sports as a sports director at CBS station in Mississippi. Yes.
Yeah, there's a connection there. And I did news and sports on the radio. And when you're doing AM FM radio, you're not, in case anybody doesn't know this, AM FM radio has kind of been, well, it's just declined naturally because of things like this, but they're not employing, a news reporter and a news director and a sports director and a sports reporter. A lot of those are shared duties now. And so, anyways, yes, I have no, I'm not trying to rip anybody. I understand people are busy and they get caught up in things, but I just want everybody to know that I am still, I wanted to just know information. I think it's an intriguing story. And I know a lot of Iowa fans have expressed that they want to know about John Budmayr and what he is allowed to do, what he's able to do. Why is he here? I'm not saying they're going to tell me, well, why is he not getting paid? I'd love to hear that from John. I don't know that John would ever go on the record and say, but I think it's an intriguing situation. So I'll keep doing my best to dig on that. I know we're here to talk quarterbacks specifically today, Mark. And so John does kind of relate into that because he's a former quarterback himself, and certainly a former quarterback's coach. Is he kind of acting like a quarterback's coach now on the field? I don't know. I know the media here's the deal, Mark. The media got a short window 2 weeks ago at a practice, and there was a report that John was on there working with players, working with quarterbacks. So that in and of itself would tell me that Iowa is able to have him on the field. Now, perhaps the clause there is because he's not getting paid, and that makes him exempt from that rule. I have no idea. That's what I'm trying to figure out. But my point is, that is a positive that he's able to be out there and work with these guys. He's a former quarterback. He was, again, the OC and quarterbacks coach at Colorado State. I can tell you this, and I'm just repeating what I've heard. John Steppe, who's a fairly new reporter for the Cedar Rapids Gazette, he had basically said, after observing Iowa's quarterbacks, and I'm not saying he's a quarterback guru, but he did just state this on his program here a week or two ago, that when the 30-minute window that he observed, he did not think the quarterbacks looked very good. So, that's the 30-minute window that one reporter got. Take it for what you will. I know that Tory Taylor made a comment to Spencer Petras, and this is, I saw this circulating on social media today, and of course everybody wants to talk about it. I guess he made a comment to Spencer Petras that, boy, I'm going to have to punt a lot less this year because you guys are doing great. So, if that inspires you, I'm at the point, Mark, where I've been burned before. I remember a certain former player on a podcast from 2 years ago talk basically, and I'm going to kind of summarize this, but he basically had said how, and nobody had seen Spencer Petras in a game yet, but he had basically said that Spencer Petras was a gunslinger, much more accurate than Nate Stanley. He's going to be a lot better than Nate. And no offense to Spencer, but that's just an insult to Nate, because that's not the case at all. I'm not saying Nate was great. He struggled to get his completion percentage above 60%. He struggled with accuracy at times. He's definitely struggled with the deep ball, which I think Spencer's better at. But collectively, I don't think there's any comparison as of yet. For anybody who doesn't realize this is Spencer Petras, would be his senior year technically. He would have another year to come back. If he wants to come back for another year and Iowa wants him back in 2023, he could come back due to COVID. But this is his fourth year. So I don't know what that means. Does that mean that he's going to have the edge as it relates to the battle at quarterback? I will say this, and I'm pulling up I want to make sure that I'm not missing. I'm trying to make sure I have the walk-ons correct as well, because as you know, Mark, there are times where injuries can factor in, and walk-on quarterbacks can become a factor, at least in practice. But I read an article yesterday from Rob Howe, who I know Rob has been kind of, I have no problem with Rob. I don't know Rob personally. He's been kind of a controversial writer to some, because people feel like he was not, that he was not fair to Kirk during the 2020 offseason issues. And I'm not going to comment on that. But the fact of the matter is, Rob has been on the beat for a long, long time. He wrote an article today or yesterday about Spencer Petras and this competition. And I'm not going to sit here and just complain for the next hour. I know some people feel like I probably do that about quarterbacks. I'm not trying to do that. But here's what I'm quoting from Rob Howe's article. As you and I both know, Mark, it has been widely publicized that Kirk and Brian have both said that this is an open competition. And I think that's what fans want. I think that's what's in the best interest of the program. Now, that's not even bringing up the transfer portal. I think the best interest of the program would have been to go to the transfer portal and to hire a guy like Randy Hedberg or someone else who is qualified to coach quarterbacks. Those two ships have sailed. They're not coming back to port. So what we have to realize is what we have. And I think they need an open competition with the three guys they have. And that includes fourth guy who comes in this fall in Carson May. But here's a quote from Rob Howe's article in regards to that battle. And he acknowledged in here that it's been said that it's an open battle. I'm going to read you one short little paragraph. It says, time will tell how close the competition becomes. Kirk and Brian Ferentz are complimenting Padilla and Labus, but also letting it be known Petras is QB1 right now. Okay, so do you want to, before I give my thoughts just on that short little excerpt, what are your thoughts on that comment? Now, Rob Howe is the one saying that's not a quote from Kirk, but I agree with him. When I've heard, when you see the depth chart's a perfect example, and you can say it doesn't matter if you want, but Spencer Petras is listed as QB1. There was no or Padilla or Labus. It was Petras, Padilla, Labus. So do you have any thoughts on that paragraph before I start in?
Well, I believe that unlike any other position, there's an element to the quarterback evaluation process by any coaching staff that is tied to the success of the team. And even though you and I have commented in the past that the defense for the quarterback position and lack of productivity, or the offense in general, cannot be defended by, okay, double-digit wins and Western Division championships and so forth. I do think that there is a component, and this is not just reflective of Iowa's perspective, but across the country, that as long as your quarterback, or as long as your team is meeting or exceeding expectations, that there's not going to be a change at quarterback. You're going to go into the next season riding the guy that got you there, regardless of the percentage that he contributed of that overall success. So I just think that's pretty norm across the board, and not just at Iowa.
Yeah, and I agree with you. I just, what I don't understand, to put it in simple terms, if this is an open competition, then why is it clear that Spencer Petras is QB1? I want to know that. Why is he QB1 if it's an open competition? Because if he's QB1, Mark, how can they be getting equal reps? And I'll quote the great Don Patterson. I remember him telling me this during this past season about an open competition in general. He said, equal reps against equal competition. That's what an open competition is. That equal reps against equal competition. And if that's not happening, then it's not an open competition, because you're giving an advantage to certain players. So maybe that is happening, but what Rob had summarized in his article is exactly what I've seen. I continue to hear that Petras is the guy, but it's an open competition. That doesn't make any sense to me. So I just wish somebody could explain it to me.
And that's a good point, because we're in the midst of 3 weeks in which just about every major program in the country will be playing its spring game. And I took in a litany of spring games on Saturday, and that was brought up a number of times in what are truly open quarterback competitions. The phrase that you used there, the equal reps against equal competition, where the coaching staff is typically very adamant and detailed in giving, let's say, one quarterback equal reps with the first team offense against the first team defense, the first team offense against the second defense, and likewise the second offense against the ones and the twos on the other side, and the same amount of equal reps with the same like talent on both sides of the ball for the other quarterback competing. So it's a fair competition.
And here's the deal. Again, that may be happening. I'm not claiming that it's not happening. It makes me doubt. It makes me question whether it is happening. And I still believe that there's a possibility, just like any other program, there's a possibility we see a guy enter the portal after spring. And I don't blame a player for doing that. I know some people really have a bad feeling about the portal, and they just view it like, the devil's kaboom on college football. And I think that's unfair, because players do deserve some freedoms, Mark. They shouldn't be in a situation, if a player doesn't feel like he's being evaluated properly, then I guess it's his. I mean, I don't have a problem with him moving somewhere else. Now, I agree with you, Mark. There needs to be more regulations in place than there are. But the bottom line is, I could see one of these guys entering the portal after spring. Obviously, the first guy you'd bring up would be Alex Padilla. It'll be interesting to see how they balance the battle heading into fall, because if you're Kirk and you're Brian and you're trying to give your team the best chance of sustaining and achieving offensive success, then you're going to try to keep all three of these guys here and have those guys compete against Carson May this fall. If one of them leaves, that hurts. I'd love to have Deuce Hogan here. I know we can't go back in time, and I know people have ripped Deuce Hogan ever since it's funny, Mark. I don't know if you noticed this, but I've noticed it with some of the Iowa fan base. It's not everybody. Probably a small percentage, but as soon as somebody leaves, it's like there's this defense mechanism that's triggered. Well, he wasn't that good anyways. He was bringing the team down. He was a parasite to the locker room. I just think that's ridiculous. I listened to Deuce Hogan, by the way, during a press conference with Kentucky just a few weeks ago, and he sounds like a really nice young man. And I don't remember hearing him interviewed. Maybe I'm sure he was at some point in Iowa City. I would be surprised if he earns a scholarship down there in Lexington. I would not be surprised. But the bottom line is, right now, this battle should be hot. It should be intense. We'll see. We'll see on April 23rd. In 11 days, we'll find out if, at least we'll get a glimpse into this battle. And The unfortunate thing is, and I saw Darrell MVP's comment in the chat about a spring game, and there is no spring game, Mark. We don't run a spring game in Iowa. And that's always frustrated me because to me, and I don't know if that's always been the case, but as long as I can remember, they don't really run a spring game. It's a spring practice. So it's Iowa fans show up because they're Iowa fans and they're passionate, but there's not a, there's not a black versus gold scrimmage. And so it will be intriguing to see some of these battles, but kind of, and the other thing is too, Mark, we talked about this a year ago. I remember on this very show, you watch a spring game and you see typically the defense dominates, right? And it makes the offense look terrible. Well, the offense hasn't been very good, but at the same time, you're going up against a defense that's just incredibly good. So you take everything with a grain of salt, but quarterback will definitely be the most looked at position on April 23rd. There's no question about it.
This isn't directly related, but of course it's a division rival and a situation in which this particular coaching staff, speaking of Scott Frost in Nebraska, decided to go a certain route and use the transfer portal. But the very first play of the Nebraska game, Casey Thompson threw a ball to the right sideline on an out route. And I'm not going to say that Adrian Martinez is or was not capable of making that same throw, but I will say that he typically, when faced with that same throw, did not throw it accurately most of the time. Like Casey Thompson threw an out route in which the wide receiver was double covered. The route was undercut by one defensive back and the other one was over the top, and he still out threw the coverage and laid it right on the sideline perfectly. It had to be a 28 or 30-yard throw. And again, Adrian Martinez is physically capable of making that throw, but he's inaccurate making that throw probably 7 out of 10 times. And I'm not blowing out of proportion one throw, but it just kind of stuck in my brain. Wow, that was the first play of the spring game at Nebraska, and that's why they went and got a guy that led the Big 12 touchdown passes.
It's interesting because I heard an Iowa guy the other day, an Iowa media guy, say on the record when that addition and Nebraska's activity in the transfer portal got brought up, well, there's a reason why these guys are transferring. They're not playing. And I don't understand that line of reasoning. You just said he had the most touchdown passes in the Big 12 last year. So not everybody, I don't know why there's still people who believe that. There's still people out there who believe that everybody who enters the portal is leaving their school because they're not playing or because they're scared of competition. That's just not true at all. Who would have started at Auburn had Bo Nix stayed? Probably Bo Nix, right? I don't think Bo Nix would have been active in the portal going after a guy like Calzada. It'd probably been Bo Nix. Thompson may not have started with Ewers there. We won't ever really know. Jaden DeLora would have been the starter, I think, at Wazoo. Maybe it would be the kid from Incarnate Word. I mean, you can go. I know you can reason different ways, but just because you've got two really good quarterbacks on a roster, one guy's not playing, that doesn't mean the second guy's no good. It just means he's got a guy who maybe is primed to beat him out. So I want to say this, and I'll give you a shout out here, Mark. If anybody missed your show yesterday, I haven't gotten a chance to watch the whole thing, but your live show you did yesterday, the short clip that I was able to view specifically on Kirk Ferentz, and I won't play spoiler, but you ranked every FBS head coach, which, man, that had to have taken a while. I mean, that's kind of a big job. So I applaud you for doing that. I have a hard time just throwing up a certain position and depth at a position on my channel, throwing up like 4 guys on the screen and then a few walk-ons. So I applaud you for that. I'll say this. I think you hit the nail on the head when you have brought up Iowa, specifically quarterback play. That's what we're talking about today. And you didn't, I don't think you were disrespectful to Kirk Ferentz with your ranking. Again, I won't divulge that right now, but you weren't disrespectful, but you did bring up the fact that, well, I'll let you say this, Mark. What has, from the outside looking in, what has Kirk Ferentz done to make this offense better from your vantage point?
It seems as though the positive aspect of what's going on at Iowa is, of course, two positions that the program's known for is offensive line and tight end, and that continued development. And maybe you would have to answer this for me, an uptick in recruiting overall, but also on that side of the ball. So that would seem to be in place. But other than that, would have to be viewed making the evaluation to date on the coaches in place and the offensive coordinator. The performance has not been what you would expect from a top 15 to 20 program in the nation.
Yeah, I'll give them this, Mark, because I want to be fair to Kirk, but I agree with what you said yesterday, and you just brought it up. I do like what they've done at running back as it relates to recruiting. They've got LaShawn Williams and Gavin Williams coming in this year. They've got, coming back this year. They've got Jazzy Patterson, Caleb Johnson also coming in. I know they've tried to pursue guys in the portal. Hasn't worked out, specifically the kid from Stanford that's going to Mizzou. I do like what they've done at quarterback. I think they've done a decent job at receiver recruiting. I think Charlie Jones is a really good ad out of the portal from Buffalo. Keegan Johnson was a kid who's has the potential to be a star. Could have easily went to Nebraska, where his father was a really good player. So I want to acknowledge that. But the biggest problems, at least in my opinion, and I think you share much of this opinion, the biggest problem is quarterback, schematics, and coaching. Quite frankly, I mean, when you have your quarterback struggling with fundamentals, then I think that comes back to coaching. So what has been done about those issues? Ken O'Keefe stepped aside. I'm assuming that was his decision. I don't think Kirk would have probably told him to step aside given his relationship with Kenny, which I think was a problem. When you have a guy that you really don't feel comfortable dismissing if he's not performing well. And he promoted his son, who had not proven himself as the OC. And I'm just being fair here, that folks, this is, again, it sounds like I'm just being nasty to Kirk. I'm not trying to do that at all. But he promoted his son, who hasn't proven himself, to coach a position that he's never played, that he's never coached. He doubled down. And the other thing, you brought it up last night, Mark. It wasn't me who brought it up. He refused to go to the portal. He just refused to go to the portal at that position. And I think it was the position of biggest need. Now, you can argue maybe offensive line was right there. I think it probably was in the conversation. And they did go to the portal and swung and missed with Hunter Norzad. So that's how I would evaluate quarterbacks. You try, as a fan, I think you have a sliver of hope with John Budmayr coming in, that perhaps that he can squeeze as much talent out of this room, specifically Padilla and Petras. Squeeze as much talent as you can out of there and fix some of the fundamental issues. And then the other little glimmer of hope is maybe Joey Labus is just incredibly good. Maybe he's just the next Heisman winner guy, Mark. And then the other one is, perhaps you have a situation where Brian comes up with some schematic way of changing the offense to a point where it is more friendly to the passing game in general. I don't know exactly what that looks like. I'm sure Brian, I said this earlier to a friend, I'm sure Brian is going to do something different this year as it relates to the passing game. Because I don't see any way that he's not a dumb guy. I've never claimed that Brian or Kirk are not intelligent. I think they're both very, very intelligent on the field and off the field. But there's some things you're just not equipped to do. And I question whether Brian's equipped to coach quarterbacks. But I don't question the fact that Brian knows that this is probably his last year. He's got to do something here and now. So I have no question he's going to go all out, and I'm sure he's going to try some different things. And so I will applaud him when he does that. I'll root for him wholeheartedly. But I think most fans right now, it's Labus. It's Labus or bust for a lot of fans. That's their mindset right now.
Corey, you ran down the numbers for Iowa quarterbacks in the Big Ten versus the rest of the league. I think something that we do pretty well here, and I think you do as well, is go to the wins and losses. That's your statistic that means more than anything when evaluating football teams, programs, coaches. Then go to that particular unit. If we're evaluating a running game, a rush defense, pass defense, whatever, look at the numbers And the numbers aren't everything. The numbers are a starting place, and they're a strong indicator. Look at what preceded that, what succeeded that at that position. If there are other mitigating factors, injuries, other things, just the style of play, I'll take all of that in regards to statistical analysis, but put it into context, not just take it for what it is. Okay, that was the number one rush team in the Big Ten. They must rush the ball better than anyone. Okay, well, let's probably, but let's look at what else is going on there. And there is no getting around when you when your production is bottom 3 to 4 in the Big Ten in passing in every category, and this has been going on year after year after year after year after year, and then in total offense, bottom third of the country year after year after year after year. That doesn't have to be placed into context when it's been going on for 15 years.
Yeah, I mean, and listen, I am in no way placing all the blame on Brian Ferentz. I'm in no way placing all the blame on Kenny O'Keefe, but the common denominator there is Kirk. And so my thinking, not trying to trash him, because there isn't a coach in the country, Mark, who would be really good or even probably good coaching every position on the field. Now, maybe there is. I don't know of one. I mean, I don't think most coaches would. I don't even think most coaches would claim they can coach every position on the field. I don't think Nick Saban would claim that. So you have to fall back on, hey, I am not equipped to coach quarterbacks. I think Kirk has probably said that in the past. I'm sure he said that. So what I would do is go hire the best quarterback mind I can find. Right, Mark? That would be the logical thing to do. So is Brian Ferentz the best quarterback mind you can find? Absolutely not. Come on. We're not even that's I hope he succeeds, but don't try telling me that he's the best quarterback mind you can find. A guy who's never coached quarterbacks, a guy who openly said 2 weeks ago that he doesn't know how to throw a football. So I hope it works. But I'm not going to sit here and sugarcoat everything. I've been very complimentary of every position on the field, even offensive line. I think they've got good personnel, Mark. You've heard me say that several times, despite losing several guys on the inside. And by the way, I was reflecting on this I don't want to change the subject, but I was reflecting on that conversation of the O-line this week. You could argue they've lost their top 3 interior guys now, with Ince departing from football. Ince, Schott, and Linderbaum are all gone. Now, maybe you say Connor Colby was better than one of those guys, but it's a lot of attrition there on the inside. But I digress. The quarterback battle, I hope that it's an open competition in summary. And I think from a fan's perspective, you want Labus to win, right? You want him to win the competition. It's nothing against Petras or Padilla, but you want to see something different because we've seen 2 years of Petras and, a small sample. I still think Padilla's got more upside. I really do believe that, Mark. I mean, you've watched Alex Padilla. I mean, his stats aren't great, but his ability to be mobile and get out of the pocket, which, judging from what Brian said a week ago, he doesn't really like quarterbacks that are going to be running for yardage. I mean, he basically said that, Mark, right? Did you ever watch that interview?
I'm sorry, I did not.
You need to watch.
I need to watch it, just out of respect for you, because you sent
Absolutely.
it my way, and I need to look at it. But I always seem to be about 37 deep on my to-do list, so I did not get around to it.
And I see the comment from Breyer. I appreciate this comment. It's a good comment to make. I am excited for Marco Lainez as well. Marco Lainez is a 23 guy. I don't know as much about Carson May. I think Lainez has athletic ability to be, I don't know, a poor man's, I don't want to say Brad Banks, but I think he's got that mobility. He seems to, again, at the high school level. So I'm excited about Marco Lainez as well. But I don't think, well, certainly Lainez isn't going to help him this year. I don't see May helping them this year. That's another part of this that we haven't discussed, Mark. This narrative and this idea from Iowa quarterbacks. We heard Alex Padilla say it last fall that the offense takes a year to a year and a half to learn. That's such I don't understand that. I don't know how that's possible, because everybody that I've talked to that has a background in coaching. I mean, Don Patterson, I remember asking him that question, and it's not a diss on anybody, but I remember asking Don that question, and he thought that at most you're looking at maybe a year to be able to master an offense. It shouldn't take that long. So maybe Kirk and Brian are doing something to simplify it, because it just shouldn't it shouldn't be this hard. It shouldn't be this hard to get somebody up to speed. And I think that's probably the number one thing right now, because you've got really talented guys, specifically Linez and perhaps even May. I know May was a 4-star by some sites. They've got talented guys, but if you don't know the offense and you're not putting them in a position to succeed, then we got to figure out how to get these guys acclimated faster.
I was scurrying to find Spencer Petras's quarterback rating as it and QBR as it ranks nationally.
Well, I can tell you his QBR. Do you have the stats from the nation?
Yes, I've got passer rating here. I don't have QBR.
Okay, well, I think it's the same, isn't it?
No.
Isn't it? Is it measured differently in college?
So the passer rating is different than the NFL. The NFL caps at 158.3, but it's the same concept that every pass has equal value. What is great about the QBR is basically someone devised this, and I think it's masterful, that basically you are taking the statistics, but you are placing it into context of the situation. So if it's 3rd and 20 and you complete a 4-yard pass, was that successful? No. Any quarterback can check it down for 4 yards and you walk off the field. That's not successful. Versus throwing a 4-yard touchdown pass to win the game. If you throw a 4-yard touchdown pass to win the game, you're at the 4-yard line. That's all you can do, and that was a successful play. Or on 3rd and 2, you threw a 4-yard pass and completed and converted. So those are taken into consideration. It takes the actual situation of the game and whether the play was successful or not.
Well, then I learned something new about the difference between QBR and passer. I thought they were virtually the same in college. I'll give you his passer rating. His passer rating in 2020 was 119.
Okay.
And his passer rating in 21 was 117.
Oh, my goodness. So, because, okay, 119, I have to keep hitting the show more button to show me more. There he is. So Petras, he was at 119. Why don't I see him at 119? Anyway, I was just trying to get a beat on. And do you have his touchdown to interception ratio?
I do. Let me see here.
It was about 1-1, wasn't it?
Yeah, 10-9.
10-9.
And let's go ahead and give you Alex, because Alex played enough. I think the sample size is sufficient for this conversation. Now, the one disadvantage he had was he didn't get to pad any of those stats against, the likes of a Kent State. So his passer rating for 21 was a 99.1. 99.1, 2 touchdowns, 2 interceptions. He threw for 49% completion percentage.
Yeah, there are a few quarterbacks in the country that in this day and age do not have well over a 1-to-1 ratio of touchdowns to interceptions. Also, the 57% completion percentage is well below acceptable standing. And I've got him, I see Petras at 117, but anyway, rather 117 or 119, whatever it is. That again is, unfortunately, ESPN doesn't number the statistical ranking, so you can't go over and say he's 47th in this. You'd have to do the actual count. Well, the count is like, yeah, it was not a successful season, that's for sure, from a passing standpoint.
And so, yeah, the bottom line is, you brought up evaluating a team, and I know we've talked about this before, but evaluating a team, if we're going to solely base that on wins and losses, then I guess, yeah, the offense is passable. Then the offense is really good, right? Because if we're just basing it on wins and losses. But I speak for a lot of fans, I think, and when I say fans are not, the idea that the grass isn't always greener, like I hear this all the time out of people. They say it about a coaching change, like Kirk steps down tomorrow, we could end up being the next Illinois or the next Rutgers. People say that all the time. I don't believe that's the case. I mean, I'm not saying it's impossible to have a bad hire, but and I'm not going to give Iowa basketball fans a history lesson here because I'm 26 years old, but like a bad hire took place when Iowa hired Todd Licklider. He was here for 3 years, and they bounced right back out of it with Fran McCaffrey. And before that, tell me the last time Iowa basketball had a bad coach. I mean, Iowa's had pretty much sustained success, whether you want to say it's not good enough or not. But we're talking NCAA tournament caliber teams: Alford, McCaffrey, Lute. I mean, certainly Coach Dr. Tom Davis. And I could say almost same about football. I know football's got a bit of there was a period of time that before the pre-Hayden years that Iowa football really struggled, as you know, Mark. But I do believe that Iowa, this was brought up the other day to me as well, that Iowa is one of the few markets where you don't have a pro sports team. And so, Nebraska's in a weird predicament where they have that same situation, and yet they can't seem to get out of their own way. And I think I would like to think they're the exception to the rule. I do believe Iowa's a special place. Facilities-wise, Iowa's right there with the rest of them now. I know there's still going to be some disadvantages, but that mentality that, well, the grass isn't always greener. We could end up being Rutgers, or, we don't go to the portal because maybe the next quarterback is worse, and that's going to make a bunch of guys leave. I am tired of that mentality, Mark. I'm tired of hearing that. I think that's just an apologist way of thinking. It's just I think it's a loser's mentality to think, quite frankly. That's just how I feel. And I've said it before, Mark. I've also brought up Fran McCaffrey, kind of comparing his philosophies recruiting wise to Kirk. That's one of the reasons for anybody who doesn't understand why I still really have faith in Fran McCaffrey, even though he's not been to a Sweet 16 since he's gotten here, and he's been here 12 years. And I know that's frustrating and he needs to get there. But I appreciate the fact that he's willing to swing for the fences, specifically in the transfer portal, because I happen to know he doesn't love the portal. And I think there's a lot of coaches who feel that way. I know Dabble Sweeney hates the portal, right? But if you're going to succeed in 2022, you're probably going to have to use that portal, unless you're Dabo or Nick Saban, and I know Nick Saban uses it. But if you're not able, in fact, they just got a really highly touted offensive lineman at Vanderbilt today. But if you're not going to use the portal, you're going to fall behind. And it is frustrating because not just quarterback, Mark, but given the struggles offensively, it's not just quarterback, but given the struggles offensively, Iowa has gotten one guy out of the portal this offseason, and he's set to be the third string tight end this fall. That's all they've done in the portal. They've gotten one guy who's going to be a third string tight end. Look, I just that doesn't inspire a lot of confidence in the offense, in my opinion. Mark, you relate to how I'm feeling on this?
I think that Kirk has a formula, and again, there are positives to his approach and there are negatives to his approach. The positives are stability, understanding who you are, your identity, having those core values, and not wavering. The negatives are that you're not going to, most likely, while your floor has been set and you probably won't break through the floor, you also won't move the ceiling. And the formula is great defense. And I won't even go to the numbers on the defense. All you have to do is watch Iowa football. And I know roughly what the numbers are, but they have fielded top 15 defenses in the country. Again, I'm not going by statistics. I'm going by, they have one of the top 15 defenses in the country most of the time, and a top 15 special teams unit. And the turnover, and he's got to be given tons of credit for this, the ability to force turnovers and limit turnovers on offense consistently. And there is a randomness to that has been proven, but to overcome the randomness of that and be consistently near the top of the leaders for 20 plus years is pretty remarkable. But that's the formula, and that lifts a bottom 30 offense in the country to win 65% of your games. And in the last 5 years, more like 75% of your games.
Yeah, that was the only thing that I would pick with you on your comments last night, Mark. And maybe I misinterpreted what you said, but
yep.
you said that Iowa sort of has been on a sort of a plateau, but sort of falling down a little bit. From a record standpoint, they've went 10-3, 6-2, and 10-4. 10-2 in the regular season. So Iowa fans would say, well, with the exception of the COVID year, we only played 8 games. We've been winning double-digit games, and I don't know from a wins perspective if that would hold true. I think you could argue that it's kind of went up. I mean, just over the last 10 years, I can guarantee you that's the fact, minus 2015.
I was drawing that line, unless I'm mistaken about my own words and where I was, because I talked about 100 and some odd coaches. I was drawing that line from finishing 8th in the country 3 consecutive years in his first 5 years to now.
Yeah, and we all know the story. We hadn't won a Big Ten championship in 18 years. Never won an outright Big Ten championship. We that's all a fact. And I thought it was interesting the other night when you made a comment on one of your shows. And yes, for anybody who doesn't, I do listen to you when I'm not just here just trying to talk. I do listen to your programming, Mark. So I did hear you make a comment that you think it's ridiculous that fans or that schools hang banners for division championships. And it got me thinking, because I have no problem with hanging a banner. I think it's a really nice accomplishment. We celebrated when Iowa won the West this year, but I do think that just shows a difference in mindset. And we've talked about that. I called in and we talked about that, a week ago on one of your shows about, is Iowa really concerned? Is Kirk Ferentz really concerned with national success? We keep hearing him, he compares the record of Iowa's program over the past several years to the rest of the Big Ten. Is he concerned with getting to the playoff? I don't know that. I mean, again, my thinking on it is based on the moves that have been made, transfer portal, coaching hires, non-hires, that I don't really think that that's probably priority number 1, 2, 3, or 4. I think if it happens, great, but I don't think that's high on the list. And so I do think that has influenced my thinking on success, right or wrong. I think that's probably the case with a lot of fans. I do think we've kind of become accustomed to just the goal is to win the West. I know not everybody can be Ohio State, but the goal is not to win the East for Ohio State. It's just not, right? It's to win a national championship. Is the goal even to win a Big Ten championship for Ohio State, Mark? Because I kind of doubt it is anymore.
That's on the way.
Sure. It's on the way. Yeah, absolutely. You're going to get to the college football playoff. You're probably going to win a Big Ten championship. But, that I guess that my thinking on it is I have not seen enough evidence that tells me that the staff is real concerned with getting to that next level. And that's what all the fans who are frustrated that I see in the chat, that I see comment on this channel and on my channel, that's what they're frustrated about, because they do see a defense who, like you said, top 15 year in and year out, a special teams unit, top 15 year in and year out, guys returning who could possibly elevate, if you had a good offense, elevate this program to something great. Charlie Jones is one of the best, I think, punt returners in the country. Torrey Taylor is one of the best punters in the country. We're not even scratching the surface on defense. And it seems like there's not as big of a concern from the Iowa program to make that offense at least decent to good, because they're that close, Mark. They're a good defense away from having a championship season.
And this has to be the frustration as well. And again, it's not my frustration because I don't have investment in the program or the winning or losing. I'm just a football guy that enjoys the football. That unless I'm wrong, unless somebody can prove me wrong, you don't have to pay attention to one side of the football in detriment to the other side of the ball. So they don't have to sacrifice the special teams and defensive success by saying, let's fix the offense. And in doing so, when you continue to have those top 15 units, you have an opportunity now to have a great team and have a special season. And if for some reason, and it's going to happen, and I don't know, we would have to go back and you would be able to do this much more accurately and quickly than I would. The last time Iowa did not have a top 15 defense, when they just had a mediocre defense. Well, then you are setting yourself up for 6-6, 4-8. How long ago has that been? It's not been that long. What,
10 years?
2013? Yeah.
12.
Yeah. In that range, 12. So if, you're shooting yourself in the foot a couple different ways there.
And it's you could make the argument that that's not the case, Mark, with say basketball, for instance. Now I know you have multiple assistants, but it's just a different sport. I mean, as I always bring up, and I know that kind of stating the obvious, but it really does come into play in this conversation. Football is 3 teams in one, and Brian's working. He's not touching the defense, nor should he. I mean, Phil Parker's not touching the offense, nor should he. LeVar Woods is focused on special teams. I mean, you have to evaluate each position, or each unit and each position completely individually. I mean, there's this idea that Iowa plays complementary football, and I've heard this too, Mark, that if Iowa changes, its philosophies offensively, that it's going to hurt the defense. I think maybe there's a small tidbit of truth there to a degree. Like, you don't want to just, if you're just going spread and you're putting the defense in bad positions constantly, that's one thing. But I mean, heck, Iowa goes 3 and out all the time, Mark, and they're giving the ball back to the defense. I mean, the defense
is even better than what it shows us statistically.
Yes, because it's constantly put in difficult. It's constantly on the field. People don't realize that they're always on the field. I mean, let's just be honest. Tory Taylor, I think he did he lead the Big Ten in punts last year? He made that comment this past week about, I'm going to have to punt the ball less because the offense looks better. I hope that's true. But it's given him a really good NFL draft tape for next year. That's for certain. But the defense is always on the field. Think about, let's take for a second about the place kicker. Think about the place kickers Iowa has had. Let's talk about place kicking for a second. Miguel Racinos, Keith Duncan, Caleb Shudak. I mean, you could down the list. Marshall Kane hits the 57-yarder in 2015 against Pitt. I know struggle at times with shorter kicks, but he had a huge leg. They have had exceptional, Mike Meyer, go back further. They have had exceptional kickers over the years. Daniel Murray was a pretty good one. And like last year, I mean, Caleb Shudak was kicking more than I think I'd love to look up these numbers, and I don't have them in front of me, but I would love to see the numbers of place kicks, just regular field goal kicks, and punts in comparison to the rest of the conference and the rest of the country, because I would guess Iowa's pretty close to the top in both of those categories. And Tory Taylor has profited with his NIL off a shirt that says punting is winning. I think that's embarrassing to the program. I mean, it's great for Tory Taylor. I'm happy. He is tremendous. Imagine if Iowa didn't have Tory Taylor. But punting is winning, Mark? Are we serious right now? Like, that's what we're really going to hang our hats on, punting. And unfortunately, Mark, there's times where I've come on our postgame show here with Don Patterson, and I've said to Don, I think the punter was the best player on the field. Not counting the entire defense, but as far as offensive weapons, it was Tory Taylor. I mean, and that needs to change. And quarterback is where it starts. Coming full circle, it starts with quarterback. And if that's not better, then you are capping, because I think this defense, how good could the defense be, Mark? With all the guys they have returning, they lose Zach Van Valkenburg. You know about Jack Campbell. They get all 3 linebackers back with Justin Jacobs, Jack Campbell, Seth Benson. Those guys, those 3 guys are really good. I mean, this could rival the Josie Jewell, Bo Bauer, Ben Neiman year. Very easily could rival that year.
There was a comment in the chat about, imagine if Iowa just had an average offense. Well, I converted that to average quarterback. I went to the Big Ten rankings. And again, the stats don't always tell the whole story. We can all list our Big Ten quarterbacks from 1 to 14, and they'd be slightly different. But understand, if you watch the game and understand Big Ten quarterback play, we would roughly have the same list. And if you just go statistically, the middle of the pack quarterback in the Big Ten is Sean Clifford, and he threw 21 touchdowns and 8 picks. He got knocked out against Iowa. So he missed that game, and I believe he missed the Rutgers game. So he didn't get to pad his stats against Rutgers. So he missed 2 games basically, or a game in 3 quarters. And Penn State played a much tougher schedule because they played Iowa's defense. They played Wisconsin's defense. Yeah. In addition to the gauntlet,
Ohio State
in the Big Ten Michigan East, and Auburn as a non-conference game.
Yeah.
And guess what, Brian Ferentz? Sean Clifford can run. He's not Michael Vick. He's not Vince Young. He's not that kind of runner, but he can threaten a defense and pick up a first down, and he's a pretty good runner too.
Absolutely.
So
And
there's your middle of the pack guy in the Big Ten. That's what he would give you.
And how many touchdowns to how many picks?
21-8.
Yeah, I mean, that's
missing 2 games and playing the defensive lineup that he played.
Right. I mean, there is no way, there is no stat out there, and I've combed through a lot of them. There is no stat out there that I have seen that has indicated to me that Spencer Petras improved in 2021. And it's not, again, I've said it a million times, I'm not knocking Spencer. It's not, you rarely hear me come on here and rip players. I don't do that. I don't think that's fair to the players. I'm not afraid to be critical of the coaching staff. I think it's a little bit ridiculous that we're shipping quarterbacks out to the East Coast. I've said that before, but that's a concern of mine. If there's not improvement, and Mark, we can go back. I mean, even when Iowa was better at quarterback, they've not been elite. When is the last time they've been elite at quarterback? Well, I would say Brad Banks. Brian Ferentz would probably say Spencer Petras, because he basically said that he didn't like that Brad Banks stat line that year. That's basically what he said. He didn't like the fact that he was running all over the place. Now, Brad was also, I mean, Brad was just athletically, and he was most certainly an outlier. I mean, you're not going to get Brad Banks every. I'm not saying that he's available in the portal every year on the recruiting trail, but the point is that would have been the last year that Iowa was pretty darn good at quarterback, and you could argue the only year. Drew Tate was okay. Ricky Stanzi had his moments, but Ricky Stanzi also threw a lot of picks in 2009 and overcame it because of a really good defense and a pretty darn good special teams unit. So yeah, you've seen quarterbacks that kind of plateau. Nate Stanley had his best year in 2017, which was his first year. Stanzi actually improved his stats from 9 to 10, but the team didn't get much better. And I don't think he passed the eye test. So he threw less picks, but is that because he improved his accuracy and his quarterback play, or is that just because he was molded into a more conservative quarterback? I think there's a claim you can make there. And CJ Beathard was better in 15 than 16. I know he's hurt in 16, but I don't believe in the regressing that some people think Iowa quarterbacks regress, but I do think there's a plateauing effect.
Brian Ferentz doesn't want a quarterback who throws 26 touchdowns and 5 picks. That's Brad Banks in 2002.
Let me defend Brian a little bit. What he said was
from the question standpoint.
The question was brought up to him from a rushing standpoint, and the number, okay. I think he had how many yards did he have on the ground? Like 500 yards that year?
423.
Oh, 423. Boy, doesn't that just make you salivate if you're an Iowa fan? I want people to tell me how does that make you feel when you reflect back on
31 touchdowns.
400, almost 500 yards on the ground for Brad Banks in an Iowa offense under Kirk.
And take this into consideration. Petras had a 117 rating this past year. Banks had a 157. And this is at a point when 157 comparatively was much higher, because quarterbacks' ratings have just gotten better. They've just gotten more efficient. They've just gotten better. So that 157 is...
Well, there's a reason why he was a Heisman candidate, right? I mean,
yeah.
He's a Heisman candidate. He's a quarterback at Iowa. Explain that to me. What's the last Heisman candidate we've had here, Mark?
Anywhere on the field?
Yeah. Real Heisman candidate. It's probably been Brad Banks.
Heisman candidate.
There's not been anybody that I mean, Epinesa, you have to be so good. You have to be so dominant defensively to even be in that conversation. Yeah. And now I know there was the Weissman for Heisman stuff back in 2012 and 13. That was just kind of a joke. But yeah, I guess Sean Green. Nick, thank you. Great. Sean Green. That's a good point. Sean Green did win the Doak Walker Award. He was a Heisman candidate. But
absolutely.
I forget about Sean because he was really here at the one exceptional year and then went to the pros. But man, yeah, Brad Banks. What a year.
While we're delving back into the past, of course, this is an Iowa show, but one Big Ten note, of course, rest in peace to Dwayne Haskins, passed away tragically at the age of 24. And we're not going to get into it, but in relation to what we're talking about in terms of quarterback productivity, Iowa fans, just imagine your quarterback throwing 50 touchdown passes.
Well, how many did CJ Stroud have this past year?
44.
So, we'll take the lesser of the two, Mark. How's that? We'll take the
Those are
lesser
the
of the
two
two.
best figures in Big Ten history.
We'll take Stroud for half a season, and it'll still be over. Think about that. Let's break down the numbers, Mark. And I know it's the Ohio State offense. I know that they've got tremendously better skill position players in general. You take what CJ Stroud as a freshman, right? He was a freshman last year. What he did last year, cut it in half as far as touchdowns. If you cut that number in half, that's still over double what Spencer Petras threw. Oh.
And Petras had the 8 starts coming in from 2020, correct?
Yes.
Stroud had never thrown a pass.
And Ohio State didn't. It's not like Ohio State didn't have a good running game, right? I mean,
they ran for 2,500 yards.
Oh, that's not too bad, right? Oh man, yes. Thank you for this super chat, Erica. We appreciate that. That's exactly why Iowa fans are frustrated. We have stellar defense and special teams. If our offense could get their act together, we'd go places. I used to think I was the only one that kind of felt that way, but I can see now that there are other people who are frustrated. Not that I didn't know that before, but it seems like as we go further, it's amazing when I read comments on social media when you've got, for the record, I think there's a lot of Iowa beat people that do really good writing about Iowa, and there have been a lot of this past week. There've been a lot of positive articles about the offense, and I mentioned the Tory Taylor quote that was tweeted out that there's going to be less punts than ever before and all this stuff. I see all the comments from fans, and I know that Twitter usually brings out the worst in people. Man, I don't see any positivity right now with the offense, and I hope that I provided some, and I hope that we provided some when we broke down what I think is going to be a good, not real deep, but a good running back room, a good wide receiver room, and an offensive line with upside. I hope that we inspired some confidence there, and I hate to just dash that all today, but it's upsetting because I don't like going through an off season where there's just this much negativity, but at the same time, Mark, I understand to a large degree and to a large extent.
Antoine's been watching a while and has evidently found the Iowa channel. So Antoine, we appreciate that, following us over from the main channel. And he is adamant about this comment. I think he's posted it maybe 3 times. So we'll just address it here. Antoine, I don't know what team you root for, but yes, Iowa very much made its intent, its approach to the quarterback situation well known in its lack of activity. So to address your question about, do you say we will never get a 5-star quarterback? I say money talks if you go all in with NIL to get one. This is after Antoine had commented and asked ourselves and the chat, what are the chances Iowa's going to sign a 5-star quarterback?
I mean, there's almost no chance that ever happens. And I hate to say this, but I think there's 0 chance that happens under Kirk. I don't know. I mean, Linez is going to be maybe the closest. Right now, he's a 4-star. I don't know how much. I don't think he can get to 5-star status. But that's why I give a big attaboy to the coaching staff, because they have recruited decently well on offense these last 2 cycles, with Linez and Carson May both being 4-stars, and then the running backs that they've had, a couple of guys who I believe are both 4-stars. But those comments that you made, or that Brian made last week, Mark, that how he kind of views the quarterback position, that he's a distributor and his job is not to be running around. He's just to get the ball to the playmakers. That doesn't make any elite quarterback want to come here. Now, remember, they were very close to landing Zach Wilson, and he ends up going to BYU, and then it ends up in the NFL and is a high draft pick. So it's not that they haven't had an opportunity to land guys who could develop into that. And I'm not saying they won't. Hopefully they do. I don't have a lot of confidence in that happening with the current staff in place. I don't know that they have staff to develop these guys into 5-star caliber players.
We and when I say we, I mean College Football Nation tends to get a little hung up on 5 stars. There's only 35 to 40 of those players coming out of high school football each and every year, and there's about 300 4 stars. I saw a breakdown the other day. This is pretty stark, and I'm not surprised because I'd seen similar numbers. The percentage of 5-star players that go on to play in the NFL, or I'm sorry, to be more accurate, are drafted into the NFL, because the making it as a free agent was difficult to track. Pretty exhaustive for this individual, that West Virginia guy that comes on, Travis Kenobi. And his numbers line up with what I've seen previously, so I believe them. The percentage of 5 stars that are drafted is in the 40 to 45% range. 4 stars, it drops to between 10 and 15%. 3 stars is about 3%. 2 stars and below, it's minuscule, like 0.0 something percent. So it means something.
And
it definitely does.
I know I'm beating a dead horse, Mark. I remember I always get a kick. I'll at times, Mark, just if I need a good laugh, I'll go back and read some funny comments that have been made about us or about me or about the show. And I get a kick out of one of our listeners that commented back during this during the winter period. There goes Corey beating that dead horse again. And I thought it was funny because I'm beating a dead horse, but we're talking about Iowa probably never being able to land a 5-star quarterback. It doesn't matter, Mark, if you can develop these guys into 5-star players. That we got to acknowledge that's what Fran McCaffrey has done at Iowa with Luka Garza and Keegan Murray. Neither one of those guys were 5-star guys. Keegan Murray may be a 3-star. And he's developed both of those guys. I mean, Keegan Murray's going to be a lottery pick in a couple months. So that's what Iowa needs to do with the quarterback position. And I do believe that's what is frustrating about the Randy Hedberg situation, because Iowa could have had him. And what has he done, Mark? He developed Carson Wentz, Trey Lance, and Easton Stick all into NFL products, none of which were higher than 3-star status. One of those guys, I believe, was a 2-star, one was a 3-star, and one was a 0-star. And all of them are in the NFL now, Mark. And so if that were to happen, if there were a coaching move where you get a guy, and John Budmayr might really be able to help, but John Budmayr, Mark, he does not have the resume of a guy like Randy Hedberg or David Yost, he just doesn't have that yet. And then maybe he will turn into a great college football coach at that position, but he doesn't have the resume yet. If they had somebody like that to develop somebody who, like Spencer Petras, like physically, I think I don't know how to evaluate Spencer physically. Obviously he's not real mobile, but I think he's got a decently big arm. He is a big kid, which can have its downsides as well. Linez, I think, is very athletic. They have guys with potential. I think physically, but they have potential. And they just got to develop them. And I just don't have confidence right now in the developers that are working with the quarterbacks, minus John Budmayr, who I think the verdict is very much out right now. And again, I don't know how much he can work on the field. I don't know if he can work on the field. The report was that he was out there, and I guess until the compliance office calls me back, Mark, we won't know the answer to that. So I hope I have an answer for you next week. And by the way, Mark, next week we're not going to just shut down spring discussion and spring previews. I know we're already, over halfway into spring, but the one position / unit we missed was special teams. So we'll hit that next week, I'm assuming. Mark, is that sounding good to you?
Sounds good to me. Can't miss special teams.
We can hit special teams, and we'll cover every. There's a lot of really crucial. In case you didn't notice from our conversation, there are some really important players on special teams for Iowa, and there's a question mark or two specifically at long snapper. It struggled at times last year, and even more consequential, I think, at place kicker. I've got several guys competing, but we'll talk special teams next week, and promise will be a lot more positive because I feel a lot better about the unit.
There's one thing I can guarantee. It's when I reference recruiting rankings and stars and the importance and the validity of them, that somebody will always grab the outlier. So, of course, Ferris is letting us know Tom Brady was not a 5-star, and Drew Henson was the biggest recruit Michigan ever had. Yes, we can always we can always grab outliers.
Well, let's be
That's
honest,
not the
Mark. There
point.
are a lot of, I know you're talking quarterback, but there are a lot of outliers at other positions that have come from Iowa. I mean, Iowa has just done a tremendous job developing guys on the line, tight ends, not so much wide receivers and running backs, but almost basically every position on defense. So they have done that. But you're right. As it relates to offense, it's hard. It's hard to do that. Randy Hedberg would be. He's produced some outliers, right? I mean, fair or not, whether you think Carson Wentz is a great quarterback or not, he's a starting NFL quarterback, and I think Trey Lance is on his way.
We would love to have some Iowa impact and influence on our Discord. So go to Patreon, search MarkRogersTV, sign up there. We'll get you the link, and you can join us on Discord, and you can talk college football all the time. And, of course, join Corey at From the Hawkeye at the Storm right here on YouTube. So get on over there, check out Corey's work. What is the latest?
Well, produced a video last night. Appreciate you asking that. Produced a video last night. Fardaz Amack, who is considered by most to be a 5-star transfer. Talking about swinging big in the transfer portal. That's what Fran's doing with the big 7-footer from Utah Valley State. Wanted by basically every program out there, including Kentucky, Gonzaga, Houston, Arizona, Texas Tech, etc. So Iowa's in on him hard. They just visited him last week. He'll be coming to Iowa City here soon. So that is certainly a topic around Hawkeye Nation. Joe Toussaint just actually recorded a segment with your guy Coos for West Virginia. Recorded that yesterday. He's on his way to be a Mountaineer, so happy for Joe. And so I think most Iowa basketball fans are looking at the portal and trying to figure out who they're going to be able to land. Will it be one or two? They'll definitely get one. I mean, if it's not Fardaz, Fran's going to go after somebody, a big man somewhere in the portal. And, there's some other recruiting battles that we're following. I still don't know anything about Kyler Casper. I've had people ask me about him. Could Iowa, this is going back to football, is he going to end up coming to Iowa? Everything I've heard is not real favorable right now. At one point a couple months ago, I felt pretty good about Kyler Casper's recruitment. But, Mark, why would you, if you're an elite wide receiver who's wanted by basically every program, why would you come to Iowa? I mean, that's not me trying to discourage players from coming here, but am I right? Well, why would you want to come here and play with the quarterbacks that Iowa typically breeds and the offense that Iowa runs? It just doesn't make any sense to come here. So I don't think I'm not saying it's impossible that he still comes here, but that's certainly a recruitment that people are following. Mac Markway's headed to Brian Kelly and LSU, which I kind of expected. And then of course, Caden Proctor, I feel pretty good about that one. I'd say that's probably more important than Kyler. I know Kyler is a difference maker, especially offensively, but Proctor much higher. He's one of the highest rated recruits in that class, period, in the country, regardless of position. So, we have the spring game in 11 days. And then, boy, what's after spring, Mark? I mean, we got May, June, July, and, basically just, I'm going to have a good time because people need to subscribe to my channel for certain and to this channel because be talking to recruits, talking to former players, current players. I know we're going to have Don Patterson on. And Mark, I want to get Don on this show. Would you like to have Don join
Absolutely.
our Tuesday show?
Of course.
I think fans would enjoy that. And we'll get Don on this show as well after spring is over.
Absolutely. Don is just first rate. You learn so much listening to him. No question. Our next show is only about 10 minutes away over on the Nebraska channel. They showed us what they have in their spring game in front of about 45,000 at Memorial Stadium. So we will talk it up with Greg Peterson from Husker Online. And then we've got an Oregon Live show tonight. Not a regularly scheduled weekly show, but we have an Oregon channel, and we'll talk Ducks at 8 Eastern as well. All right, Corey, appreciate you making this happen once again, as always.
It's one of the more enjoyable shows we've done, Mark. Thanks for having me on, and definitely subscribe here, and hope everybody tunes into the Nebraska show.